Hello, guys and gals. Welcome to the podcast.
Today we express our political thoughts with you at home.
And that political thought today is the Israel-Palestine conflict. As always, we're stating our opinions in a civil discussion with little to no preparation, just our knowledge and general feelings. Before we get started, let's give a little bit of background information about the podcast, why I started it with Bradley's help, and why, not necessarily why, but what our political stances are. I know I have a defined one, but Bradley's a little different. He'll explain. Anyways, we started this
Subjects
podcast.
and I disagree with other subjects.
Yeah.
So everything we say is opinionative. You do not have to agree. You do not have to agree.
Yeah.
Completely up to you. We are just stating our political values for you at home to listen and agree or disagree with.
And not necessarily just opinions. I mean, obviously, most politics is opinionated based on facts, so our opinions will be based on facts. We can't necessarily make up anything just to, support our argument.
Yes.
Anyways, we started this podcast mainly because I had the idea to after we had a bit of a civil discussion with another one of our friends on the bus. We talked about the same topic. We had a lot of fun. We didn't necessarily agree on everything in the beginning, but we met at a middle ground and we had a good time and we thought it was fun, so I asked him if he wanted to have one. I had already set it up because I had asked a couple of people if they wanted to be on and they didn't want to, but I still had, the OBS layout set up and whatever, so I asked him if he wanted to be on, and he said yes, so this is where we are now, Season 1, Episode 1, talking about...
Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan. He's going to be joining us for our second episode. So,
yes.
He was
I
one of the
was
ones
just putting in some context of who Nathan was.
So
my name is Bradley. This is Carter.
I'm Carter. We forgot to introduce ourselves. Yeah.
Y'all just bear with us.
Yeah, we're new at this. It's a new thing. This is I think it's the first episode of a podcast I've ever recorded. I did a couple for Discord server, and then we started this one. So this is about all of it. Anyways, today, our episode is going to be on the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's happening very recently, and I guess we're just first off going to have a discussion about it and what we think, and I'll explain what's happening to those of you who don't know. But before we do that, I'm going to state our political stances so that you have a little more knowledge about us. First of all, my name's Carter, and I align on the left as Social Democrat, and I'm very progressive. Bradley?
I really do not have a very certified political stance. I genuinely, I speak of what I agree on, and I will speak on what I disagree on because I do understand pros and cons of both situations.
Yeah, that used to be me for quite a while because I didn't really know much about the politics scene, but I recently got into it a lot and I started, picking up values and such, and a lot of those I would like to get into in later episodes. But today we're talking about a very recent news story. It's kind of something that's been going on for the past, couple of years actually. Israel and Palestine have always had a bit of a, argument, whatever. I don't really know much about the history, but what I do know... Complications. What I do know is that recently Israel, and I'm not entirely sure who has been pushing this. I believe it to be either the Israeli government in, which is what I think it is. I think it's the Israeli government with their military and their police forces. So they're kind of guiding this conflict against Palestine, which, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of like a subdivision branch, sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like loosely a part of Israel, I believe. I don't live in the Middle East, so I don't know much about their politics scene, only about big things that are happening. Anyways, the Israelis, I think that's how you would define them, they have recently been using brute force to remove Palestinians from their homes. There's videos that have surfaced of an Israeli man telling a woman that he's going to steal her house because, that's what they're doing currently. And the woman's like, okay, it's my house, you can't do that. And he says, well, if I don't do it, someone else will. And that's very true, because the whole thing going on right now is people, are stealing houses. We can get into it later, but they're shooting rubber bullets at people inside the churches, inside their temples, or wherever they pray at, I'm not sure. But they're holy places. I think it's like the second holiest place, or second oldest holy place of the Muslim belief, which is the Palestinians, I think. Sorry if I'm generalizing, but that's just what the information I've been giving. Anyways, they are taking people out of their homes. There have been many people killed, including children. And to summarize, the Israelis are basically recolonizing, which is like a generalist term. They're doing what the British settlers or American settlers did to the Native Americans. Not to that extreme level, which was like mass genocide, murdering, wiping lands and rebuilding. But it's essentially the same kind of idea, where they're taking people out of their homes and they're moving their people in. They're basically wiping out the whole people belief, their system, everybody that was there, and moving their people in, which we can get into.
They are basically taking over more land for their religious belief, and they believe that if you don't believe what they believe, you're nothing. That's their land, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But some more information on the actual war is like the ongoing struggle between Israelis and Palestinians that began in about the mid-20th century. It is amidst the greater Arab-Israeli conflict. Various attempts have been made to resolve this conflict as part of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, but it has been referred to as the world's most irretractable conflict. So there's no irreversing it. It is happening and there's no turning back, is what a lot of people have said. But hopefully they can find some way to stop the conflict before it gets abruptly out of hand.
And I think we're at a point now where we're just on the edge of falling into, what was it that you said at the end? A greater conflict?
The greater Arab-Israeli conflict.
Yeah, I think we're at the end of, like, there's something you said at the end. It was like a bigger...
most irretractable conflict.
Yes. So it's like we're almost at the point where it's become... I don't know. I don't know how to word it properly. Like I said, we're new at this. It's become, in even the past 2 days, so much bigger than I think a lot of people thought it possibly could be. Because, I mean, women, children, men, people in general, it doesn't matter. People in general are being massacred. They're being killed. Homes stolen.
And yes,
it's become...
I don't mean to make this sound...
But it's become violent. It's reached...
I don't mean to make this sound casual, but for the past however many years, it has been lower. It's still been a very, large conflict, but it's been lower, with very few, major guns, violence, and actual, killing and mass murder sprees. It's not been that seriously for the past. People have died, which is terrible, and I don't mean to sound it as casual as I am, but now it has become bombings, it has become suicide missions, it has become terrorists from the Israeli country going over to Palestine, planting bombs, killing children, like Carter has stated, women, peaceful and innocent people are dying because of an Israeli conflict that happened years ago.
Yeah. like not necessarily happened years ago, but started years ago, and it's still going on, and it's become more brutal and violent than, to my belief, it ever has been. Now, like I said earlier, I don't live over there. I don't know, the whole situation, but I do know that it's become very serious in the past 2 days, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon until an outside force steps in, because the Palestinian people currently are practically helpless. They're under the rule of Israel, if I'm not mistaken. So they kind of can't do anything, which is why I want to get to my argument. I think that an outside country, specifically America, should step in and defend the Palestinians. Now, this does not mean that we need to kill the Israels or, shoot back and, murder them or, instate fear within them. I'm saying that there needs to be kind of like,
So you are basically saying there should be like a big brother situation.
yeah.
I do agree with this statement a lot, but I do feel like if America got involved, that could lead to much larger tension, causing wars with America, which nobody wants. But nobody there wants Palestine and Israel to fight. But the thing is, I feel like if we send troops, it could be pros and cons. Cons, Israeli is on our backs and everything. They are coming after us.
Well, there's
But Palestinians could become an ally if we help them and show them that we actually care and respect Palestinians. Then that's more allies for potential wars in the future or any other situations that we need Palestinians on our side. But then we would have Israelis on our backs more than ever for interfering with their government and what they believe is right.
I get what you're getting at, and I agree with most of what you said. But I want to bring this up. There's a Wikipedia article, and before you nerds say, "Oh, well, Wikipedia is not a trusted source," well, it comes from other studies and other articles, and Wikipedia is an army of nerds trying to preserve knowledge. So I would doubt that anyone is going to sabotage a random article about Israel and America. So, it states here that Israel is one of the United States' two original major non-NATO allies in the Middle East. And if you don't know what NATO is, it's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You can look into that. So they're one of two major allies in the East. So right now, where America sits by not helping the Palestinians, they are helping Israel. Because if we're allies with them, then that means by not interfering, we are taking the Israel stance. We are defending what the Israels was doing. Because think of it this way. Imagine we were allies with, let's just say neither of them. Okay, America would be in the middle ground, and we wouldn't be taking a stance at the moment. But since we're already a huge ally with Israel, one of the top two, like I said, in the Middle East, since we're already allies with them, that's basically telling the Palestinians that we're defending the Israel's actions and that we're on their side. We're defending their genocide, we're defending their stealing of homes, and we're defending their extremist beliefs and their fascism, which in itself could cause a battle against Palestine. Or Palestine, sorry.
Yeah, and I do agree with what you are saying here, but what I know, my knowledge is that other countries, I'm not 1,000% sure which, and but I have heard that other countries have tried to help make peace in Israel and Pakistani and all of that. But you have to understand that Israelis started military occupation of the Palestinian territories in 1967. So even if we did go help Palestine, they would think that it's long overdue.
Can you elaborate, please? Just a little bit more.
All right. Well, back in 1967, the Israeli government sent military occupation to the Palestine territories. And that created a 6-day war, which have now led on to years and years of peace and all of that destroyed. Innocent people passing away, innocent people and children, women, everyone getting slaughtered out of their homes, which I understand. And we do need to do something about that. But I feel adding more to the war would not be the correct solution.
Here's my point. I don't think we should add to the war. I think we should de-escalate the war. In no way do I believe that America needs to be fair, kill anyone. All we need to do is step in and say, okay, this has to stop. And if Israel fights back, then Israel fights back. But here's the thing. Are we going to sit back and watch these people be murdered and be taken from their homes and be essentially washed out of their home country? Or are we going to take their side and be like, okay, Israel, you gotta back down. This is not right. Now, Israel's already our ally, and since America is definitely a stronger country, we have a larger military arsenal, a larger military in general, and like I said, the fact that we're already allies, they're going to be a little scared of us. Even though they know that with the treaties that we have and being allies, that they most likely wouldn't hurt us. But the fact that their biggest ally, America's second or one or two, first or second biggest ally in the Middle East, is telling them to stop, they're going to realize that they should probably stop, because if their biggest ally is threatening them, then that's going to instate some fear. Because if it was just, a normal country that they don't know much about, then they're going to, it's just going to blow off. They're not going to care. It's not a big deal. But
Once again, I agree completely with what you're saying. I do feel like no conflict needs to be added to the situation and try to de-escalate the situation. But that is much easier said than done, because there are people in the Israeli government and the Israeli military that have been born and raised to kill, and born and raised to fight back. And then if we go there and we just be like, hey, stop, they're not going to be like, okay, I'll back down, no matter how large our government is. Because in Israeli, there are people who kill themselves trying to kill others. So I feel some of them will back down, and they might even consider it and throw in the flag. But I feel like in years or maybe even months, it will escalate back to the point that it is today again.
well, let's say that eventually it does re-escalate. I feel like we'd be stuck in a cycle regardless. If America steps in, then it would stop, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stop the entire disagreement. Not necessarily disagreement, that's a bit of a harsh term. The fight, the conflict. America doesn't step in. It goes on. Potentially, they have, to be fair, a war. The way it looks right now, it's not good. But I don't know if Palestine can legally fight against Israel. That's a whole different thing. But anyways, that'll keep going on. So if, let's say, the military U.S. stepping in is not an option, what we at least, at bare minimum, need to do, since we're allies with, since our first or second biggest ally in the Middle East, I believe it's our biggest ally in the Middle East. Since Israel's our biggest ally in the Middle East, we're basically telling the Palestinians by not jumping in that we support Israel. And what I'm saying is that in order to do our part in the de-escalation of the conflict, or to help the Palestinians fight back, because there's no arguing that the Palestinians or that the Israelis are in the wrong.
Hold on. All right.
There's no arguing that the Israelis are in the wrong. So I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyways, they're in the wrong. What we need to say, not necessarily act on it or fight, what we need to say to state to the Palestinians is that we're on their side. It's the morally right thing to do. And if we say that and not necessarily, fight back or go in, since we already have treaties and Israel's our ally, I don't believe that they would fight us. That's a terrible mistake for them, and they know that because they know how strong America is. I don't believe they would do that. We just tell them that we're on their side. It's the morally right thing to do, and it will either de-escalate the conflict to a point where it's at a manageable range, or the conflict will escalate between them and they decide, and America comes out unstained, unhurt, I guess. I don't know.
Unscathed.
Unscathed, sorry.
Yes, and I do believe that I am understanding what you are saying. But in my eyes, if we say we do send troops, not to have war, but to try to de-escalate the situation. Like I said, we're going to have ton of Israeli armed forces, government on us. But if we don't, I do see what you're saying. We're going to have Palestinians thinking that we cannot be trusted and maybe lead to more conflict with us in the future.
Yeah.
So either way, there is conflict.
And not necessarily, we don't have to send any troops. Let's say no one goes to Israel. All we have to do is have our president broadcast on national television that we are on the Palestinian side, because Israel's leaders will see that and they'll be like, that's our biggest ally. We should probably stop doing this, or they're going to snap, because if our biggest ally is against us, then we're doing something wrong. They're going to realize that. We don't have to send troops. We need to broadcast. The Palestinians will know. They'll feel better, and Israel would potentially back down.
All right, I'm starting to understand what you were saying more. But like I said, this has been going on for years, and I am pretty sure, from my knowledge, not 1,000% sure this is 100% true. Our American government has spoken about this topic on national television, and that did not seem to make anything much better. Because if we're not doing physical help, like I do believe if we had to do anything that involved going to the Israeli area, then we should at least take some people getting forced out of their homes into our care.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Just
like we should do that in America.
And when, yes. When them people, the Israelis, when they're all their troops, when they take over that Palestinian area, which is terrible because Palestine is like, it's a great place. Like you said, many memorials and many very large religious buildings and places that we're never going to be able to get back once they get destroyed. But if we keep fighting back, that is what causing when the Palestinians are continuously fighting back, because they're not going to give up. It's their home. When they are continuously fighting back, that's causing more and more damage to be made to their home. So I feel if they back off, let the whole situation die down, no matter how long it takes, and we come back and we fight back for what's right, not necessarily fight, but because if we don't do anything and say the Palestinians get killed off and that gets taken over, that's going to cause more conflict, because then once they see that they can take over Palestine, they're going to want to take over everywhere.
Exactly. So if they realize, hold on, let me start from the beginning. First of all, we can't take all those people out and let them take over and then push them back in, because I feel like that's just more fighting in general. I think we should just get it done with firstly. Secondly, what you're saying, how they've already discussed it on national television, they have, but if I'm not mistaken, that wasn't recently, and that was before this, killing and taking of homes. Before then, it was kind of just a conflict. Now it's a battle.
It became a war.
Yeah, it's kind of a war now. I wouldn't say it's a full war; it hasn't been declared, but it's once Palestine gets their army up, it most likely would become one if we don't de-escalate it. Let's say that America or any country doesn't do anything, what would happen in that situation? It would most likely, since Israeli undoubtedly has a stronger allies, undoubtedly has a larger military, undoubtedly has a larger arsenal, and undoubtedly has a larger, supporters, like I said, that goes into allies. Anyways, all those things combined, that would absolutely be enough to overpower Palestine. So, without the biggest ally, America, telling them that they're in the wrong and that they need to stop, then all that other stuff is just going to, outweigh whatever minuscule amount of force Palestine has. Palestine.
All right, it has just came to my knowledge that this war is getting large. There has been another Israeli aircraft strike in the Gaza city.
Do you know
So
the casualties toll or building destruction or anything?
I will
I'll
try to find more
search that up.
conversation or
information.
information.
While I'm looking that up, I'm gonna just state my point again. Anyways, when Israel, with all this stuff, they are completely going to overpower Palestine. Okay, there's no doubt about it. If nothing happens, if no one steps in, Palestine, most likely, will be taken over by Israel because they simply don't have the forces or the resources to stop it. Okay, so it may cause downsides. It may be extremely hard to do it, and we, as young adults, we may not know the proper way to do it, and I don't think we will ever know until we're adults, until we know a lot more about this. But I think
Do you
the
remember
argument
how I
hold on.
stated?
I think the argument we've had good so far, but I don't think we can figure out the proper way to send them in, or not necessarily send them in, but just to de-escalate the conflict. Because the way it is right now, it is so big and so beyond us that I think that it's not up to us, and it's not something that we can really get how to stop it. We can have ideas, but I don't think that we'll ever have the winning idea. I think that's up to America, but my opinion is that if no one steps in, not just America, if no country steps in, Palestine will be overruled, and the Israels and Palestine will continue fighting. There will be more murders, more bombings, more destructions of sacred places, of homes, and ultimately will be de-escalated with Israel taking the victory. So I don't know how, I don't know when, but America
totally
at some point has to go in.
I totally understand. Yeah, and I do agree that it's going to get worse and worse if we do not go in. But do you remember a couple minutes ago I stated that if we do something or they take over completely of the Israeli area, they're going to start going into other places and trying to take over?
Exactly. So we have to
It has just came to my knowledge that it has been cited and noticed that the Israeli forces and all of that has been spotted in Jerusalem with 3 women killed in Israel from a Gaza rocket, from the rocket attack that I was talking about. 3 caregiving women, they worked as caregivers, killed.
So what you're saying is that Israel won't stop at Palestine? Battle.
They are starting in Jerusalem as we speak.
That's a scary thing to think about. If they're starting
Israel's
somewhere else, that most likely
ambassador to
means
India?
that they believe that they've won, which is the point I'm trying to make. They've practically won, and that defeats practically both of our arguments. They've won. What are we gonna do? Not necessarily they won, but
We can still go in and stop it before it causes more damage.
exactly.
I'm starting to be.
Yeah, I
I'm starting
think
to
that's where
agree
we
with
need to
what you're
agree on
saying
is
more and more
that there's
because
some way we have
I
to help.
have a thing from the Israel ambassador to India. Would you like me to state?
Yes, please.
Israel's ambassador to India, Ron Malka, I'm not sure if I stated that right or not, extended his condolences on Twitter, that's an odd place, for the death of an Indian national on Tuesday. He wrote, "Our hearts are crying with her 9-year-old son that lost his mother in this cruel terrorist attack from Israel."
So they're
So
attacking India now.
this might mean, we are not sure if the Israel government is forcing. It might just be terrorists from Israel. It could be ISIS. We all know that is a big issue in Israel. But if the ambassador of Israel is saying stuff like he apologizes, but it was Israel rockets that were sent that killed this 9-year-old son's mother, then it might not be a government situation. But it is their job, since it's their country, it is the government's job to de escalate the situation. So I feel like
Who,
we need
Israel's
more on their
government?
part before we put in our.
I mean, on the
The
part of
Israel
Israel?
ambassador, Ron Molka, said that his heart is crying from the loss of a mother of a 9-year-old boy on the cruel terrorist attack.
Well, he can say that, but his army and his police force are actively taking people out of their homes and killing other people. Now, he may not be directly supporting that, but by not stopping it, he is. If he has control over Israel, or even just control over the military, take them out of Palestine if you're sad that people have been dying. You know what I mean? If they're sad that they've been dying by terrorist
If he
attacks,
is
then pull
giving
them
his
out of
condolences,
Palestine.
then he should be able to do something to stop it.
Exactly, but he's not.
All right,
So we have to take action.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is demanding an immediate halt to the spiraling escalation in Israel
That's good.
is the Israeli-Palestinian violence. A spokesman says the United Nations is working with all relevant parties to de-escalate the situation urgently.
That's good. See, other countries have to step in, or not just other countries, but that technically does kind of. But United Nations, our group, we have to do something about this because it's getting out of hand.
Yes, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is, this is his words, is gravely concerned by the upsurge in violence and is deeply saddened to learn the increasingly large number of casualties, including children, from Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Israeli fatalities from rockets launched from Gaza.
And I just saw an update from Vox News from 12 hours ago that that Joe Biden is refusing to quote unquote go left on the
Yes, I see something
Israel-Palestinian
right here.
conflict.
It
So
says,
Democrats have moved left on Israel, which means they're trying to de-escalate the conflict. Biden hasn't. President of the United States.
yes,
We have to do something. We have to
President
make
Joe
a
Biden,
announcement,
I do not
whether it's
agree
in the
with
UN
most things
or
that President
whatever.
Joe Biden says, politics or not. But the White House says President Joe Biden is briefed daily on developments in Jerusalem and Gaza and has directed his team to engage intensively with senior Israeli and Palestinian officials, as well as leaders throughout the Middle East.
So what I guess you're saying is that they're trying to de-escalate as best they can.
It states that.
Okay. Well, if that's true, that's good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Joe Biden's been vocal, I guess. He hasn't said anything to Israel.
No, I do feel that Joe Biden can do more of an effort. Definitely.
I mean, imagine that your best friend was a bully to, your best friend's brother, okay? In this situation, you're the president of the United States, your best friend is Israel, and then your best friend's brother, who he's being mean to, is
Okay.
Palestine. Hold on. Because Palestine is like a branch of Israel. So saying he's being mean to him, you don't necessarily know the kid being bullied very well, or his brother who's being, beat up or whatever. You don't necessarily know them very well, but you know that your best friend is in the wrong. And in this case, best friend, that kind of means strong ally. And so, imagine you tell your best friend that he has to stop. Your best friend values your opinion. So, when they hear you say that, they're going to think about that. They may not stop, but it's going to make a big influence. So, if your biggest ally tells you to stop, it's going to make a big influence.
Yeah, I understand that part of what you were saying. But I just received word that some of the Israeli government has spoken on what Joe Biden has been doing. It says it's the press secretary Jen Psaki, not sure if I'm saying that right, from the Middle East, said on Tuesday that Biden's team is communicating a clear and consistent message in support of de-escalation.
That's good.
And
That's
she said that Joe Biden, his words, that is our primary focus.
That's great. That's great. That's exactly what I'm arguing for. And I'm sure you agree that it's a good thing.
Yes.
Well, I'm very happy to see that that's one of their, main priorities. I'm happy to see they're taking action, and I'm happy to see that pretty much exactly what we've been saying is happening in the world right now. So that's a great thing to see.
As we speak. Yes.
As we speak. That's pretty incredible. It's almost as if we have chips in our phones listening to everything we say. Just kidding, that was a joke.
One more thing from Jen Psaki. She added that the Biden administration will also continue to support a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
No, if you'll give me just a minute.
My apologies for my dog in the background.
Oh, it's fine. If you can give me just a little bit, list off a couple more articles, news updates as they go live. I'm going to research just a bit more. You can just fill in the time.
I'm looking at more information, seeing what is good for the topic that we are speaking on.
Okay, I think I have a general understanding.
What I just stated will also continue to support a two-state solution to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. She also said that is the only way to ensure the just and lasting peace that two peoples have struggled to achieve is going to happen.
So, like you said earlier.
So she's basically saying that Joe Biden is working to, no doubt, make a peace and end the conflict in Israel and Palestine and whatever countries and states are being added to the conflict, I should say.
Well, that's great. Like you said in that article, they said that the best solution currently was a two-state solution, and I'll elaborate on that. So the two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict envisions an independent state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, which is kind of like, one country, Israel, one country, Palestine, kind of separating, because right now as it is, Palestine is kind of being abused. Abuse is kind of a harsh term. You know what I mean? They're in about.
Yes, and before we continue, can we please state something about, let me think of a good way to put this. All right, my apologies. Continue. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. As I was saying, two-state solution would be the independent state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, and whatever's currently inside of Israel can stay in Israel, but Palestine needs to be separated. Um, the boundary between the two states is still subject to dispute and negotiation, with Palestinian and Arab leaders insisting on the 1967 borders, which is not accepted by Israel. So, Israel doesn't like that, so they might have to draw up new borders, or they could be forced by allies or by Palestine to take the original 1967 borders, which I think you said something about 1967 earlier in the debate. But anyways,
That is when the conflict began.
So I guess they were arguing about the borders of the states, combine, kind of their battle. But, the best solution currently is to reinstate those borders, separate Israel and Palestine, sign a peace treaty, or find new borders that both states can agree on, and sign a peace treaty, and this whole thing should be over. And when they realize that everyone is against them, Israel this is, when they realize everyone's against them, the tax on other countries, like you were saying, would most likely stop. Because if this main one that they're doing, other states are kind of testing the waters. Right here is like, the big push forward. Can we get away with this? And everyone is fighting back. So, no, they're not getting away with it. And once this situation is de-escalated, hopefully by a two-state solution, then all other attacks on other countries should be halted.
It states here in this article that I'm reading from the AP News article. I'm not sure the exact apnews.com. That is where I'm getting my information at the moment. But it states here that there has been nothing serious since the missile that hit Gaza. There has been nothing serious that have happened so far, which is great. But that was only a couple days ago, so maybe we should be preparing for more or hoping for less. But it says here that there was a riot, not necessarily, but there was a protest in Israel, and the Israeli police threw tear gas, stun grenades, and shot rubber bullets at protesters. So it seems to me that the Israeli police force has no care for the situation.
Yeah. To end this debate situation, and we can end with a little bit of a chat. Like you said, they are actively hurting their own citizens who are protesting against this. So one, you can tell that they don't care about the people. They only care about taking over that new land, making money, improving the economy, whatever it is that they're going for. Taking over Palestine. Okay, that. Two, they're bombing people, hurting people, taking them from their homes, trying to overtake Palestine. And three, everyone is convincing them that this is the wrong thing to do, that they need to stop, and that the best solution to end this, or to de-escalate this conflict, is with two-state solution, so that, two states can be separated. Anyways, Biden administration is stepping in, telling them it's the wrong thing to do. They should give them a message. All other countries that they were either planning to attack, or, like you said, the live news updates with, I think it was Jerusalem, those attacks, they should, most likely will, stop, and
or at least de-escalate.
Or at least de-escalate. And the battle with Palestine, that should stop or at least de-escalate, and the two states should separate, potentially preventing any other conflict. So I think the discussion we've had here today has been a great one. I think we've had a good, not necessarily debate, more of like an extended agreement to understand each other's beliefs and what we think should have happened. And I think we did a great job of that. And I think we just proved to all of America that two people with mostly differing political views can agree with each other, can have a civil discussion.
We can reach a middle term.
Yes.
Two kids.
Two kids. with differing opinions.
can have more common sense than some people I have seen. But
Well,
yes, today's been a great podcast, a good starting podcast.
It's been a great first episode.
So thank you everyone who has seen or is seeing this as we speak. Thank you for tuning in, and catch us tomorrow for the next one.
We'll see you next time.